welcome to Press Play, our public relations podcast that discusses everything PR, but in real terms and the real things that you actually want to talk about and learn about. So welcome. Joining with me today is Bethany Rhodes and Ashley Pontius, and I'm Jennifer Vickery. We have combined a great deal of PR experience. We work really a lot, all day long with national media, local media, trade publications, all different types of media. And today we're talking about something that I think many people ask about and want to know about, which is national news. So national news is very coveted, and we're going to discuss some creative ways to really get national news. I'd like to kind of just pass it on to Bethany to see, like, what are your thoughts about national news? What is the appeal? What's the drawbacks? Tell me a little bit.
I think, when you first talk with your client or, your boss at work and you bring up national media, they automatically think of the Today Show or Good Morning America, New York Times. And those are great and very, attainable, but there are a lot of things that might fit your company better than those shows that is going to get you just as much attention, through podcasts or through streaming, through social media, through radio. So it'll be fun to talk about some of those things.
Definitely. And Ashley, I know you've worked a ton in national news and day in, day out, just like Bethany. And so this is pretty interesting to see maybe how you might approach some of these different and creative ways of achieving.
Absolutely. I think it's a slow build. So if you're just getting into doing media at all, it can be a big leap to go right to the Today Show or Good Morning America. That's amazing if you do. But you may not even want to. You may want to get a little experience under your belt first, doing some local TV shows and programs in your own market or in smaller markets. You might want to be in some print publications first to really become seasoned, get some media training under you. And as Bethany was saying, sometimes those interviews can be just as effective. If you're sharing those out on social media, if you're reaching people specifically in your industry and your niche, sometimes you're going to get more bang for your buck out of those as you would being on the Today Show.
Absolutely. I'm really glad actually that you brought up as well. You might not want to at first, you might want to get some experience, because I definitely resonate with that if you have that moment of being on the Today Show, it being right out of the gate, you want it to go so perfect that having that other experience will definitely help you perfect it. So I thought that was a really good point. So I want to talk about, when we think about national news, I think many of us think about TV, but if that's kind of the pinnacle at the top, I wanted to talk about other ways of getting national exposure. Certainly, there's radio, and radio I think is sometimes overlooked. And I wanted to get both of your opinions and take, maybe starting with Bethany, on how approaching radio is different and how that leads to really great national results.
Yeah, I found that radio, they really do a lot of they do everything from hard news to, there are more fluff pieces. But I think if you look kind of maybe in your own backyard, if there's kind of a hub of an NPR, maybe NBC radio. I had a client that I was able to get featured on, NBC radio here, but then it aired on all of the NBC radio stations across the country. So just kind of starting locally, finding those correspondents that might work for you and pitch more of a harder news angle if, it's more of an NPR or more of a news radio, and then kind of know when to pitch the more personality pieces. And if they have, different stations across the country, it's going to air across the country then.
That's a great point. And Ashley, what has your experience been with radio, national radio?
Yeah, echoing a lot of what Bethany said, I think that one of the benefits to it, you're going to get a longer program. A lot of times these radio programs, they can go anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes. So we just had a client who connected with the iHeartRadio host in his local market, and then it aired across the nation. I think it was 100 plus stations across the nation later that week. So, and it was a 30-minute interview. So think about that. So you're not just getting a 2-minute segment or one quote in an article, you're actually getting a sit-down interview with a host for a longer format. And it's really a conversation, and you really have an opportunity to tell listeners about your organization, about your message, about something you want them to donate to, whatever it is that your cause is or your message is or your business is. Radio is still a huge opportunity that I think is overlooked. It's kind of seen as maybe a little archaic or from a time past, like from decades ago, but it's really not. People still listen to radio. People are loyal listeners.
Yeah, you're
It's
really
kind of the same thing. Oh, go ahead.
No, I mean, you're right on that, in that people still are listening, and it's still a really big deal. And with that client that you just had on that I heard marathon, if you will, all over, they got a tremendous amount of e-newsletter signups and social media followers. So it resulted in a really big impact. And Bethany, what were you going to share?
Oh, I was just going to say it's kind of the same thing with podcasts. Like what Ashley was saying, it is more of that longer conversation where you can talk about your company, what they're doing, your nonprofit, instead of just having that one soundbite or one little quote in an article. It gives you a lot more freedom to really talk and have conversations that are important.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about podcasts here too. So I know podcast is more niche, right? It's about a topic. It's probably the listeners that you really want to have paying attention to whatever your expertise is or story is. But I think what we get is a lot of question of like, how do I get on that podcast? I don't know. Do you guys want to share some of your experience, and do you really believe and feel that podcast is as effective as national news?
I do. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it's a specific audience. So think about if you have a business, I don't know, I'm making this up, but you want to sell construction equipment to certain people. You can literally find a podcast that just construction managers, project managers are listening to, that they're loyal every single week. They tune into this, and you're probably going to make sales off of that, as opposed to, let's say you're on Good Morning America. I have sales coming in. You're going to leverage that across your social media. It's a big deal. It's a big win. It's a big, parade for your business, but you might not get as many direct sales, feet in the door, things like that, as you would from just being on a podcast where there are 200, 500, or 1,000, however many listeners each week that are just coming for that specific information. So it's a real opportunity to reach your direct market.
Yeah, the listeners are really loyal. Like Ashley was saying, they really target specific audiences versus, the Today. We keep using the Today Show, but it is kind of an easy example where people are just watching, and they'll have it on as background noise. They'll have it on, just to see what else is on. But for a podcast, people are listening because they want to know more about that particular topic.
Definitely. And we love you, Today Show. So definitely. Do you guys feel like when you're pitching to podcast, for me anyway, I feel like it comes very naturally to pitch my client, because if I'm pitching to their niche, I know exactly how I'm going to put that segment together. Whereas like national news, I have to really, really dig and think and pull information and see what their hosts do and like, and little nuances about their shows. So that's been my experience, is I feel like I know a lot more information about the podcast because it's very narrow. It's a lot more narrow. Do you guys feel that way too?
Absolutely. I think pitching podcasts, it's pretty straightforward. You're probably just reaching out to the host and saying, hey, I have this great person I think would be a great guest. They're an expert in this field, and just listing off their credentials, essentially. Whereas a national show or national pitching, you might have to do some gymnastics and figure out, how do I fit into this? What can I create? What story can I create that relates back to my business, that's going to be relevant to them, that's going to be visual, entertaining, that they're going to want to have me on their show.
Yeah, pitching personality, I think, is half the success too. You want someone who's going to be a right fit and tell the story, but to be able to have that conversation for 30 minutes or 45 minutes.
And how about social media? How do you find, so if national media is the pinnacle of success, right? Do you guys have any tips on social media, how people can leverage that for national media exposure? Anything in that arena?
I think a lot of times I've had clients come to me and say, well, I've been on, X number of publications or an X number of TV shows, and they have a really good month or a really good publicity track record, but they're like, but I'm still not seeing any traction. I'm not bringing in more business. It's not directly helping my business as far as their bottom line. And one of the questions I always ask is, well, are you posting about it on social media? Are you really blasting it out? And not just once, you can utilize it, every few weeks. Hey, did you catch my segment on this show? Did you read my article? And put it out on all your different social platforms. And often the answer is no. And so the story just kind of dies there. So if you're not utilizing social media to advertise essentially that you've been in a publication, been on a TV show, you're only reaching the people that happen to have the TV on or happen to, maybe be a regular reader of the publication and happen to recognize you and your name. You're missing out on this huge, it's an advertising opportunity. It's essentially free advertising. At the end of the day, you're getting to utilize that as a tool to bring in business.
Yeah. And Bethany, I know that you even reach out sometimes to reporters using social media for national opportunity.
Yeah, I make it really targeted too. So if there are health reporters that use Twitter, or I guess X now a lot, I'll catch up by just reading their stuff and even just liking things without necessarily pitching them, just to show that I am interested in that topic. And I truly am. I want to see what they're writing about or what they're reporting on. And then that way I have a better idea of what to pitch and how to pitch it, just based on, what they talk about on their social media.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And utilizing social media too to find out what is trending, what's going on, and in the mainstream as well, like no matter what. So and that could turn into an opportunity. I want to talk about next, local news. How local news might be a really good way to score some national news, and how people, I think, do not know this, do not realize this. And it's something we definitely tell our clients about, but Bethany, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, each TV station is, owned by a larger company. So maybe your local ABC station, like here, is owned by a company called Scripps. So they do a lot of national stories on local stations. So if you watch those, you'll be able to kind of see who the national reporters are, pitch them stories, and then those stories air on all of the Scripps stations. And I think they have stations in, I'm guessing here, but about 30 markets, probably more across the country. We had a client that is a credit union, and the local CBS affiliate, which is a Tegna station, asked if we had a cybersecurity expert. And so I was able to give them our local credit union. They ended up in what's called a verify segment. So it's Tegna's kind of verifying the truth about certain myths and things like that. So they were featured in that story done by the local reporter, but it aired again on about 20 different markets across the country that were all Tegna stations, as that verify for the next couple of days. So it's really cool to kind of see that story just gain traction across the country.
That is such a PR win, by the way. We love that. Like, oh my God, you took the time to do this one interview and then it explodes. It's just so cool. Ashley, do you have any tips or examples of that situation?
Yeah, absolutely. Same thing. So I know Bethany and I are both former news producers. So when you actually, and I'm sure Bethany, this was the same way at the stations where you worked, when you're producing your newscast, you actually have access to like a whole database of different video and sound bites and stories from the stations that you're affiliated with, your stations affiliated with across the country, and you can choose them. So if there's a cute puppy story in Michigan that you want to run in Florida, that's, going to fit in your newscast, you can choose that. So it really opens up, local news can open up a wealth of other opportunities to you, just in that way. And then I also think, as I touched on earlier, earned media is so often a slow build. So starting out doing those local media opportunities, so that when you do want to get to Good Morning America, one of the first things that producers often get asked is, well, have they done other TV? Have they done other media? Do they have some clips they can show me? Because they want to make sure that you are good on TV and that you're well spoken and all of those things. So if you have those clips to show them, even if it's from your local station, that's just going to help get your foot in the door and help you nail that interview.
Definitely. Next, I want to talk about streaming. So I recently was at a news interview with a photographer, but he mentioned to me, we were just talking about the biz, if you will, and he mentioned to me that right now his station is really not reporting on ratings. It's more about impressions, and he said that that had to do with engagement and streaming. So the streaming was really picking up and more important than, gosh, I mean, when I was starting, ratings were everything. So I think sometimes streaming, I think every single person I know streams something, right? Like we all stream something, but I think when it comes to national news, it's still that concept where like it's a little bit abstract of like, how am I going to be on the XYZ station that's streaming and it's not on TV, but it's streaming? It is a hidden gem. What do you guys think? I'll start with Ashley.
Absolutely. So I think that you're getting, again, more than just one show. It might run around the clock. It's going to be available online all the time for anyone who wants to view it. Whereas you might get one clip or one social media hit out of a segment on a Today Show or Good Morning America or something like that. Streaming really provides a great opportunity. It's sort of like the CNNs, the MSNBCs of the world, where they're 24/7. They need a lot of content because they're out there 24/7. So it provides a great opportunity to kind of get your foot in the door of national network coverage, I think. There's Live Fox Now, there's Newsmax streaming. Every single network has something out there that's a whole separate entity from what they're putting on TV. So it's a great opportunity to connect with those producers and get your foot in the door, get some practice, get some live interviews under your belt, and get yourself in the national conversation out there and get in front of a national audience.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Stephanie, how has your experience with streaming really changed the way that you're looking at national media?
It's interesting because they have their own team of producers and talent. It's not, in most cases coming off of TV and just streaming what's there. They have their own segments, their own segment producers. So it's kind of a different world that you're pitching. And it's really important, I think, to, watch those shows because they do have segments that are geared towards, mental health matters and things like that. But I think that helps in your pitching by saying, hey, I think I have a client, this would be a perfect segment for mental health matters. And then you can pitch to that producer or that anchor for that newscast. But yeah, it's its own team. And like Ashley was saying, they do need content, especially if it's, 24/7. But then there's the aspect of it running multiple times.
Mm-hmm. What I find too is some of the stations they're streaming are subscriptions services. So those are the like hardcore fans, right? So they are really paying to have access. And so you are getting right in front of people who care and want to consume your information. So I think that that's also another bonus. So I would definitely not snub at the streaming shows. Just like you said, Bethany, I was really impressed when I learned about like, oh, they have their own crew, their own production studio, their own, it's at a station. It's not, in someone's basement somewhere. It is legitimate. It is related to the station. And I just think it's sometimes underlooked. So yeah, well, I mean, I think that there are just so many really, really cool ways to still achieve national media. The last topic that I have is digital. So that there's still digital outlets that get a ton of attention or a ton of views. Or I mean, when we run our metrics, I feel like they sometimes have way more than like even a national TV spot sometimes. So how do you guys feel about that, about these digital media outlets and related in relation to national coverage?
Yeah, I think strictly digital, like there's, the Huffington Post, categories like that. If you go into their different sections, they might have a fitness section, they'll have wellness, finance. They have all these different sections online with different reporters covering, different topics. But there's also the aspect of freelance writers that are out there. Digital publications might not have the staff to cover everything, so they're going to enlist help from freelance writers. So that could really work to your benefit. Maybe your story ends up in multiple publications from one writer, maybe it gets picked up by multiple, but you just have different options if you're pitching to a freelance writer who, okay, they do parenting stories. We'll pitch to them. Maybe it'll end up in a parenting magazine and a column in a digital publication. So there's a lot of different options on topics and then freelance writers as well.
Ashley, if you can tell us a little bit about your experience and maybe how your clients look at that digital media coverage and how it's kind of transformed in the years.
Yeah, I think so many people see TV as king, right? But print publications transferring now to digital publications are huge. You have a huge imprint. You have a huge audience out there that's reading this content. And as Bethany was saying, it really is a little easier to connect sometimes because there's so many different writers out there. They are utilizing freelancers who work with multiple publications. So if you make two or three great contacts, they might be writing for, if you're in finance, they might work for the Financial Times, Yahoo Finance, and somebody else that you can really, they're going to keep coming back to you for stories. I can think of in the past when I've worked in the finance space with different financial advisors, just having one or two great contacts, they'd be in like Go Banking Rates, Yahoo Finance, so many different publications every single month. And a lot of publications are also, as Bethany was touching on, becoming syndicated. So if you're in one publication, that's going to go viral and be in AOL, Yahoo Finance, different things like that. Same in the health space and different areas. So I think that it's overlooked, I think, a lot of times because clients right away want to be on TV. They want to, I don't know why, but it's seen as the better exposure, but it's really not always.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really good point and takeaway. And so I think the summary of it is national media coverage is just so coveted. It is such a massive audience that you can reach, but there's so many ways to dice it and achieve the same result in different ways, in different formats, and a little bit of creativity, and really get a ton of exposure. And so it's really not as complicated, and it is very achievable. And so we hope that you get that from our discussion today. And so thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it, and we will see you next episode of Press Play.